Today, we are going to touch on one of the most obvious and yet most forgotten topics in relations to the knowledge we have of our own planet. Many believe they know everything about the geography of our planet. Artificial satellites of all kinds and from different nationalities are said to have flown over our world, photographing every detail down to the last corner of the Earth, down to the last millimeter even. But is it possible that even in the 21st century there is a place censored from humanity? The answer is yes, there is a place censored by the elite that governs us, a place to which humanity has no access. Today we are going to prove with facts that such a place exists. It's called Antarctica. A place that, strangely enough, was the subject of total consensus among the nations of the world. The elite made the decision that Antarctica, the so-called southern continent, would be placed under the protection of the United Nations and isolated from any political dispute. It was the so-called Antarctic Treaty signed on December 1st, 1959. Access to Antarctica was further secured with the signing of a new protocol on the 4th of October 1991, approved once again unanimously and under the tutelage and leadership of the United States government. Here you can see in the following link the official document of the United States government, where the access of any unauthorized air vehicle to Antarctica is strictly prohibited. No planes, no drones, no civilian flights, no commercial airline flights, no types of aerial apparatus at all, nor remote control camera systems can operate in Antarctica without the permission of the elite. We must now ask ourselves the following question. What is there in Antarctica that cannot be photographed without the express authorization of the authorities? They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and over the last many years there have been renderings showing Antarctica and what appears to be like a void or a black hole that's right at the center of Antarctica. Why are all images of Antarctica censored at one specific point? What is that censored circle that appears in all the images of Antarctica? Is this a consequence of the camera being used? If that's the case, why in the 21st century can't you find a complete live 24-hour satellite video of Antarctica? Take a look at the following link. They only show a tiny part of the continent. Why don't they show the entire satellite image of the entire southern continent? They only show us a small part of the shoreline of Antarctica. They don't show us anywhere beyond 60 degrees south. It's simply outrageous in today's world. I challenge the most skeptical reader to show me a single uncensored satellite photograph of Antarctica. I haven't found it in months of research. Not a single photo that has been uncensored, a real, non-rendered, non-cartoon satellite photograph of the entire continent of Antarctica. Why are there no satellite images of Antarctica, especially in the Australian summer season? Tremendous and devastating indeed. This occultation happens exactly the same time when we refer to the so-called North Pole. Look at the following images. We see rendered images and even photographs of what appears to be a dark void, a depression of some sort, a dark hole that's right at the center of what we call the Arctic Circle or so-called North Pole. The Arctic Circle, or so-called North Pole, is about north of Greenland, specifically in the bottom eastern south of Greenland. One can find a dark hole that's right at the center. But what is that dark hole? What's it doing there? There is always a censored dark circular zone in many of these rendered images. This is happening today in our advanced and free civilization. What is there at the poles that the elite is so afraid to show? To understand this, we must see the example of other so-called planets in our solar system. Many rendered images and cartoons also show what appears to be like a dark circular hole or a void, a depression of some sort right at the polar regions of these alleged spherical objects. These images and the fact of the brutal censorship to which Antarctica is subjected to makes us think that Earth is no different from the rest of its sister planets in our solar system. The Earth has two openings at its so-called poles, two openings that the elite censors for some important reason. What lies beyond those openings is unknown. Why should high-ranking diplomatic representatives like John Kerry or even the Russian patriarch Kirill visit Antarctica? Why were the Nazis so interested in establishing a base in Antarctica? Where did these maps of Nazi Germany come from, and who created these maps that allegedly show some sort of opening right at Antarctica, and maybe even some sort of tunnel or system that could lead to an underground world? They detailed that inner world that can be accessed from Antarctica, a world that the Nazis called Asgard, in reference to the northern Norse mythology, the home of Odin, his son Thor, and his brother Loki. Why did the United States carry out a military operation called Operation High Jump in Antarctica in the late 1940s? They said that they were just doing military maneuvers, but the truth is that the military expedition to Antarctica suffered great damage and numerous casualties. It is proven that they are hiding something from us. And that something is very serious. It's not a trivial matter. Perhaps the secret of true power behind the scenes that lies in those so-called polar regions of our Earth. The power that sees everything, that controls everything. From the top of the pyramid, we can reference Anut Coeptis. He approves our undertaking. That can be found at the very back of the dollar bill, the seal that shows the Eye of Providence as the very capstone on top of an Egyptian Giza-looking pyramid, or should we say, the deepest part of the earth. Religious traditions imposed by the elites speak of Lucifer, the light-bringer, as the inhabitant of the underworld. Bel or Baal, the storm deity worshipped by the Canaanites and of the Egyptians and Babylonian mystery schools. That Moloch, Baal, Lucifer entity worshipped by the dark elite today, the same elite that dictates the rules on censorship in Antarctica. Can that master of the world pull the strings of our civilization from the so-called underworld, accessible throughout those polar openings? Evidence suggests it's very possible. What could be in Antarctica, but not just Antarctica, also the so-called northern polar regions? Perhaps a void to some deep underworld. In fact, there is evidence that at least in the so-called North Pole, there is in fact a dark depression, a type of void of some sort. Perhaps this is the source of Earth's magnetism. Perhaps there is a giant magnet that's located right at the center of our Earth. And since water has diamagnetic properties, it could be that this repels some sort of magnetism that prevents the waters of the Earth from filling up that hole or that depression, forming a void at the center of the Earth. Interestingly enough, one of NASA's so-called rocket missions has an interesting video from within the so-called space station. Whether it's a space station or just a high-altitude plane, I'll leave it up to the viewer, but it does show something very interesting. A giant hole situated at the very center of the North Pole, so-called.